Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Melissa Estevue and I'm here at Biltmore Psychology and Counseling. We often will get questions from people about some of the basics about counseling, common questions and concerns that they have, and so we thought we'd produce a video for you guys to be able to better understand what you might be entering into in couples counseling and individual counseling. So one of the first questions that we got was, what are some signs that we should try couples counseling? So I find that in general, a lot of couples will wait until what can feel like the very last minute before they decide to make a step into couples counseling. I think there's a lot of stigma around counseling still, unfortunately, and I think that there's a lot of concern that this could somehow signal that it's the beginning of the end. And so sometimes it's nice to be able to see, okay, well, here are some of the warning signs or some of the things that could mean that you're ready for couples counseling, but also know that if you don't have some of these and you just feel like in general there's some distress in your relationship, not a bad thing for you to think and say, well, let's be proactive, let's be preventative, and try to handle some of these things before they get bad. So one of the first things that we see is that it feels like your partner is no longer on your team. Maybe it feels like every time you're arguing, it's a debate, it feels really tense, it feels like you are struggling to be able to communicate and understand each other, and it's just so hard to feel like this is your best friend, this should be your life partner, and it feels like they're on the opposite side of you. There's a very famous researcher named Dr. John Gottman, and he's done a ton of research. He had this lab that he called the Love Lab, and couples would come in and they'd have arguments in front of him, and it would be a part of this research thing to be able to see what are some of the themes in these couples that are in distress, what are some of the signs that they might be headed on a negative pathway, and he'd follow up with them 3 months, 5 months, 10 years later to be able to see, were they able to stay together and be happy, or was it something that ultimately ended in divorce? So going over a couple of these are kind of the 4 major warning signs that you might be headed on this pathway towards divorce. And his research actually found that he could predict with about 94% certainty that if you saw some of these things, it might, without intervention, ultimately go in that direction. So one of the very first ones was criticism. So he defines this as focusing on the bad of the partner instead of the good. So yeah, in general, we know that we're not going to feel like we're on the same team when we feel like that person is criticizing us and constantly pointing out the bad and constantly against us. That can feel really damaging to the relationship and ultimately feel like we're not very connected. Another one that he found was defensiveness, which he defines as feeling as though we are the victim, becoming highly guarded in our relationships or in our arguments. So that defensiveness of like immediately when you get feedback, feeling like you're putting up this big kind of warning wall or kind of being, very withdrawn can be really difficult to be able to have like healthy, more positive types of communication. Another one is stonewalling. So this is refusing to communicate or cooperate by withdrawing or pulling away. So, you can think about a classic argument where someone they're done before it even gets started. They're shut down, they don't want to hear it, they're completely withdrawn, they're completely pulled away, and there is no room to even have an argument or discussion, so it's just done before it starts. And the last one is contempt. So showing an utter disrespect and treating our significant other as if he or she is the enemy. So just that feeling of like, I don't value you, I don't value what you have to say, I have very little respect, there's just contempt here. So again, the big thing is if you have some of those things, good sign that you should maybe come in for couples counseling and should work on that. It doesn't mean that it's doomsday and it's like, well, if it's there, you're done. There's no way that it can work out. But it is an important step to be able to say, this is a good sign that we should work on this, that this is damaging our relationship. This is not making us feel good about ourselves individually. So we should probably work on this together. So another thing that I think I see as a theme is that you're arguing about the same things over and over and over again. If you're in a relationship with someone for 50 years, chances are fairly high that over those 50 years, you will have a fair number of arguments. That is not necessarily a sign that a relationship is going into a negative place. In fact, there's a fair amount of research that shows that in healthy relationships, people have a fair amount of discord and they have a fair amount of places where they're not seeing eye to eye, disagreeing about things, having some frustrations there. That's not in and of itself necessarily a warning sign. But the fact that it feels like you're just stuck doing the same things over and over and over again, and each time you have an argument, you feel more and more distant, feel more and more misunderstood, that can be a concern. And again, sometimes individually, it can feel like we're not able to get anywhere or make any sort of progress. In couples counseling, I think that there's a lot more room to be able to see, well, what's driving a lot of that disconnection? What's driving a lot of that just repetitive being stuck in the mud in terms of a conversation? and then being able to find another way out. So let's see. Another thing that I think that we can see is we begin to wonder if we're incompatible with our partner. So sometimes we'll look and say, gosh, we were so close when we were dating. It felt like we just got along so well and really complimented each other. But now come to think of it, maybe we're just so different. Maybe he's an introvert and I'm an extrovert. Or maybe we just don't see eye to eye on important values or those kinds of things. And I think what I have found is that chances are that conclusion is being viewed through a lens of hurt. And so when we feel really hurt by that person, it's hard to see the places where we actually are connected or on the same page. Instead, I think we begin to almost rewrite history and go, oh no, it's been bad from the very beginning. Things have always been hard. And I don't know that that's always accurate. I think that there's many couples that are able to find their way back to each other and see, gosh, we actually have a lot in common, and there's lots of places where we're different, but the difference doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel like this thing that leads to us being far. So again, that could be a sign. Another one is you can't remember the last time that you and your partner just laughed, like when you first met. That's one of those things in couples counseling that I really look for to see, is the couple getting to a different place? Are they able just to be jovial with each other? Is it safe to be able to kind of poke fun or laugh about something light? That will often happen because there's been healing, because there's a greater sense of closeness. So if you look at your relationship and say, we just don't laugh anymore, that could be a sign that your relationship could use some help. And then the last thing would be the stress is pulling you apart. So there are certainly couples that come in where they have really hurt each other. There's places of disconnection and poor communication. But there's also couples that are like, all of the stress that we're going through is really centered around the fact that we have what I'd call external stress. So their job is really stressful, or their in-laws are really intense, or there's a health issue that has really been painful and problematic to work through. And so, again, this isn't a place where the couple is necessarily doing anything quote unquote wrong, but a place where they could just use some extra resource and another head to think through different types of solutions and things to be able to overcome some of these external stressors that have been putting on the relationship. So we love questions like this. We want to be able to answer it so that you feel like couples counseling might not be so daunting. It might not feel like it's the beginning of the end or something that should be avoided, but could be something that really enhances your relationship and causes you to feel like you're close and better than you've ever been before. Thank you.